Okay, great. We're live. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Nia Hughes. I'm an organizing official at Bectu, and we are here for the introduction into intimacy coordinating. We're waiting for about 50 or 60 people, so if it's okay with you, Lizzie and Yarit, I'm just going to give that a couple of minutes, and then we will kick off.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Yarit's already frozen. Do you have a number for her, Lizzie, just in case everyone's having issues with their
no problem.
Good afternoon. Hi, Kizzy, Roland. That's a fun name, isn't it? Kizzy. Great name. That's okay. Hi, Alison. Hello, everyone. Hello, Rafai. That's also a great name. This has been so fun, actually, putting these Wednesday webinars on, because we've just, I don't know how, but I think we've managed to somehow capture people from around the world. But like in the UK, but also people are just like, hey, big up from Virginia. Or like, you know, hi, I'm in Sydney and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, wow, how did this even get out there? You know, it's meant to be for Bectu members only, but it's all good. Hello, Elian. Nice to have you here. Should we give Yarit a call and just let her know that she's frozen, because she might just be saying hi.
Yeah, I actually sent her an email already. Just
oh, you did? Okay, cool.
Yeah, you're looking very still.
Okay, great.
Get on.
Yeah, let me just keep an eye on the time.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, let's try and I'll tell you what, I'll drop off the call for a second and give her a bell, because I've got her number.
Okay.
Okay, I'll be back in 2 minutes. Bye.
No problem. Oh, I think we have her back.
Here we go. My apologies.
Yay, you're back. Okay, great. Now you have 2 screens. So there are
2 of you. Yeah.
There are 2. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Okay, perfect. Great. Okay, we've got 37 people in. Shall I do like a little intro, and then we can just wait for people to kind of casually come on in? Okay, for those who missed it a couple of minutes ago, welcome to this Bectu Wednesday workshop. My name is Nia Hughes. I'm an organising official for the London Production Division, and have been curating these live sessions. I have been waiting for this for so long. So I'm really excited to welcome Lizzie and Yarit, who is not Enrique, as it says on her screen, but we will actually be joined by Enrique later on. I have a few housekeeping things to go through, so please bear with me whilst I do that. We have Bectu members and non-Bectu members on the call. If you would like to join the union, we now have a £5 a month COVID/unemployed rate, which is going to be rolled out until there's some form of sense of the industry resuming in a kind of inverted comma normal way, if that's ever going to be another thing again. So if you'd like to join Bectu, I will put the details in the chat function. because this is a somewhat sensitive webinar, we're asking you to not really share anything from it, to keep it confidential, and also to please ask you to not name any production companies. It's simply a introduction into intimacy coordinating, and because of time restraints, we're just not going to be able to focus on specific issues for this session. Maybe we can do something further down the line for that. Please also, if you run the mouse along the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat function. So if you want to say hello or good afternoon, or just have some bants or chats on there, that's absolutely fine. But please use the Q&A function for any questions. And if we can ask you to keep those questions quite to the point, that would be really, really helpful to us. The way that this is going to happen is Lizzie and Yarit are going to do a presentation, and then they're going to bring in Enrique for some kind of input as well. And then we're going to go into a live Q&A. And we're hoping to have everyone here for about 2 hours. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I will pass it on to you both then. Thank you very much. And if you just want to do a quick intro to yourselves, and then we can get cracking.
Thank you very much, Nia.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
No, you go. Here we go.
Thanks. So hi, my name is Lizzie Talbot. I'm an intimacy coordinator. We founded Intimacy Directors International a couple of years ago, and we've been working as professional intimacy coordinators. And we've been really kind of honored to be here today. It's always a pleasure talking about what we do and the changes that we're trying to make in the industry. So thank you so much for having us and for coming along today and listening to us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much. And I think probably this would be enough about us. And I would assume let's start with the presentation. And again, like Nia said, if you have any questions, and even if a question gets stuck in your mind, it means that it's important for you. So feel free to kind of email it to Nia or directly to us, and we'll make sure that it gets answered.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right, so we're going to start our presentation. I'm just going to do a quick share screen so you can go along with us. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. So welcome to today. It's a presentation on working with intimacy coordinators. I'm obviously Lizzie Talbot, and we've got Yarit Dor, and later on we'll be joined by Enrique. All right, so first things first, how do we define intimacy? It's such a broad term, and everyone's got their own concepts and ideals around it. So we've all got, a subjective interpretation regarding the term intimate. So we found it was helpful to break it down into 3 sections. The first one being like contact level, so anything that's physical. The second is intensity level, and another helpful way to look at that is like the emotions and the emotional aspects of intimacy. And then the residual level, which is more sort of holistic, which is looking at thoughts and sensations, self-image and trauma, just as examples. So we're looking at those 3 sections when we're defining intimacy, which we found quite helpful when we were looking at really what is an intimacy coordinator.
Yeah. The trick regarding we'll talk a bit about how intimacy coordinators started to come about. But one aspect similar to what is intimacy is understanding what are the power dynamics in that environment that have assisted in the development of that role, or created a reason for that role to come about. So if we're looking at power dynamics, there are various information that you can get online from books about leadership and so on and so forth, but we're just going to look at a kind of four main power struggles that we can find in the environment on set and in pre-production and in post. So if we look at the first one, the power over, it's a power of hire and fire. So we're looking more at anyone that has the ability to decide who is the team that they're bringing on board, what does that team do, what is the role of each person on the team, and the person that holds the team accountable to make sure that they get their jobs done. This could be a head of department, a producer, a director, an actor. So a very high listed actor that's on board, the showrunner or the writer, and so on and so forth. Power with is when we start sharing that power. So we're looking at a collaborative process, and each department on set collaborates. The camera department, the costume department, the props, the set and construction, everyone collaborates and shares power with each other, no matter what their role is, in order to get the most successful result done. Power two, it's allowing oneself to completely pass the power to another person. So for example, when we come in on set, we might be offered a certain amount of power to facilitate a process for the director or for the actors, and we'll look at more, we'll look into it a bit more when we look at what the role actually is. But everyone on set really starts to pass power to another person, whether it's the costume department passing power over to an intimacy coordinator, or the intimacy coordinator passing the ball back to the costume department. Power within, and this comes, you know, in a great kind of 21st century post-Me Too, post-Harvey Weinstein, into the thought of how do we make sets safe? How do we make a safe space for everyone involved? And therefore, how do we allow people a feel of self-empowerment? So if, for example, you're head of department, how are you able to give enough safe space for the team members to find the power within, and to know that there's a sense of trust, a sense of collaboration, and an invitation for creativity, as much as an invitation for open communication. And that really allows that sense of self-empowerment. So when we're looking later on at how the intimacy coordinator kind of role came about, it has a connection to empowering directors, empowering actors in the process when it comes to intimate scenes, and also empowering the costume department, and hair and makeup, and the prop department, and any other department that is connected to the intimacy. So when we're looking at the status of intimacy coordinators within that kind of power chain, the intimacy coordinator has an advocate role. We do not have a hire or fire ability. We are there as a third party to help facilitate conversations, facilitate openness and a free communication between the actors and the other departments, between the other departments and the actors or the director. So everything, especially in pre-production stage, is thought through and as efficient as possible. So then we're mitigating those power dynamics in the process.
Great. Cool. So one of the things that we need to think about, if there are all these power dynamics at play, is some of the considerations. So what impact do those power dynamics have? And what might be some of the things that are going on for an actor when they're on set with those power dynamics in mind? So a couple of things, you know, when we're looking at the Me Too movement, so much of what we were considering was just the vulnerability of an actor when they are doing these intimate scenes. And if you consider the vulnerability of an actor plus the power dynamics, it can open itself up to all sorts of things, intentional or not intentional, just because these are some very real everyday things that an actor might encounter during an intimate scene. Well, you know, so we've got things like, you know, body image and concerns. You know, an actor might have just had children or surgery, or is struggling with something around their own body. And if they're placed in a vulnerable position and that is impacted by, you know, how they're feeling about their own body, and someone who has a higher or power ability enters that arena, we're starting to get into a more difficult situation. Something else that happens very often with intimate scenes is that actors often will look into extreme dieting or excessive dehydration. And again, it's sort of linked with the body image. Actors feel pressure to look a certain way on screen, and so they will subject themselves to these two things, which will impact, you know, their ability to make decisions that are right for them. The other thing is that if they're incredibly tired, because we know with scheduling, with intimate scenes, that they can often be the last thing in the day after a very hectic day on set. And so they're coming in really tired. And then you add in all the things above, we're starting to get, you know, a more intense situation for an actor to be in. If they are positioned if they are nude, or if they're in a vulnerable position in terms of they might be in a certain simulated sexual position, plus all those things above, or some of those things above that are listed, we're starting to see sort of like these layers of pressures on an actor to make these decisions that they need to make on set. So we're trying to be very conscious about making these considerations when looking at intimate scenes, because there's so much that goes into them. They are a very unique part of the filming process, a very unique part. And again, at the bottom of that is obviously the career or the rehiring concerns. You know, if I don't do this scene, you know, what may be the impact for my career? And you know, and it doesn't necessarily, like I said before, it's not necessarily intentional harm that is being caused. It's not someone, you know, coming out there, or a producer coming out there going, oh, can't wait to, you know, bully this actor into doing this scene. That's often like not the case at all. And like we said before, you know, intimacy coordinators aren't the only people to have ever been concerned about actor safety. That's a misconception. That's not true. There have been many people who have been concerned with actor safety, and you know, many people all over the production who have seen these things that are listed here and have had concerns for actors and have stepped up and have stepped in when it's not necessarily their role to do so. And so what we can do as intimacy coordinators is we can, you know, advocate for these actors who are experiencing these things in these scenes. And again, you know, we've got a lot of hope that things might change. You know, we're hoping that with more body positivity coming in, that we might see, you know, less extreme dieting and less extreme excessive dehydration. And that, you know, we're seeing a more inclusive positioning of image of body on screen. Like, that would be great, but in the meantime, we have to mitigate and manage what's going on in the day-to-day.
A little kind of personal anecdote was I remember we scheduled the intimate scene in the beginning of the day, you know, so they come in and they get it out of the way so then they can continue their day. And obviously things took a bit longer for various reasons. And I remember we got to lunchtime, and the main actors that were involved in that scene said, you know, I'm not going to really eat in lunchtime because obviously I don't want to have any water retention and all of that. So they kind of made more choices around fruit or something that can give them a tiny bit of sugar. And one of them was, was making a kind of a joke that, they'll be okay because they're just waiting for the packet of donuts that they made sure is going to be sent to their trailer halfway into the day after that scene is done. So it's just something to consider, and it's partially connected to a role of the coordination side of when is it scheduled, how are we managing stuff on set. So they have availability to foods and certain types of drinks that can help them regarding to keep energy levels, and any special requests like pizza and donuts later.
Thanks, Yarit. Yeah, so I guess we just wanted to kind of give you an overall picture about the things that have been going on previously and things that we are trying to mitigate now within our role. And again, all of these things that you're seeing now, coupled with the power dynamics that exist on set, really make for a very complicated atmosphere. And so again, our role is to come in and try and manage all of this before it ever becomes a problem. Yeah.
So we slightly touched on the notion of advocating. So again, thinking of the power dynamics, because an intimacy coordinator is a third party brought in for specifically the moments of intimacy on a show, they are there to advocate for the actors and the crew for their specific scenes. So for example, in the pre-production stage, we have discussions with the director and we have discussions with the actors. And we'll talk a bit more about the pre-production stage and our role within it. But within those discussions, that the information that we get in those chats allows us to advocate for the actors. And the liaison that we start doing with the other departments allows us also to advocate for any other crew that needs certain things on the day, like costume department, like prop department, like set department, anything that they're slightly concerned in the pre, and of course advocating on the day itself. So whether if there's, for example, I've been in the show that there was a costume standby on set due to the closed set, and I was asked to assist her actually to facilitate robing an actor. So that is something that we would liaise with them and advocate for what their needs are and how can we make their role easier on the day.
Cool. The second sort of aspect of our role is we're collaborators. That's really what we do. We work with departments. So we're collaborating with the director. We're collaborating with the DP. We're collaborating with all the different various departments on set to ensure that there's a through line for the intimacy. Because again, previously, it may have been that, the costume standbys had either concerns or advocating for actors during the intimate scenes. But the problem was that there was no sort of bird's eye view. There was no overall picture. There was no one sort of connecting the dots all the way through, like either on the day or previously or post. So it's very important that our role is to interact with everyone and get a very clear overall picture about what the intimacy looks like, who needs to be involved, and what our needs are from the various departments. And like I said, it's very overarching.
Choreography. So choreography is, let me be honest, it's a certain percentage of our role. It is not the role of the intimacy coordinator fully. As the name entails, there's a coordination aspect. So we'll talk again about pre-production beforehand, but similar to what we said about advocating and collaborating, that involves a lot of paperwork. and a lot of communication. The choreography is something that either happens in pre-production rehearsals or pre-day rehearsals, if and when that is possible. And a choreography happens in the blocking rehearsal on the day. So the choreography is a facilitation process that happens with the director and with the actors. It is not an instruction process. So an intimacy coordinator will not go in there and instruct the actors of how and where to put their hands, how to sit on one each other, what to put between them. That is facilitated with them. And the reason why I'm saying facilitation is because there are elements of consent that must be in the process. If I come in with a preconceived choreography and I instruct an actor what and how to do it, I am not facilitating them to have consent to the process, consent to the actions, consent to where on the body they are happy to get contact, consent to the proximity of how much and how close the other person comes, where is their breath going on your body. Any considerations regarding smell needs consent as well. So the process in itself is there for us to facilitate the journey that the actor needs to go through and the character needs to go through when we're collaborating in that scene with the directors and actors. And that is why pre-production discussions with the actors are extremely important, so we know what their physical boundaries, what is their consent and agreement, what are they happy to explore during rehearsals, or what are they happy to explore on the day, which might also change. So the minute that we're in the blocking rehearsal or the pre-day rehearsal, our focus is to facilitate the action, the intimate action that is in the scene, and any ideas or brainstorming of ideas that happen between the director and the actors, we start to facilitate that with them. So for example, intimacy coordinator is an intimacy specific choreographer for intimate action. So if it's simulated sex, we will have techniques of how we construct one simulation of sex versus another. We will have techniques of how to change that action per camera angle, which props or barriers can we use for that angle versus what can we use for another angle. And we will facilitate all of this by working in full collaboration with the actors, with the director, and assessing consent. So the choreography aspect is not choreography of dance. It's not a choreography of stunts or fights. It's not a choreography of movement. It's specific skill set that is connected to choreography of intimacy in particular.
That's great. And just to add to that point, Yarit, it's super important that it is intimacy specific and that you have a wide range of intimacy specific movement skills. And the reason I say this is because it may be that consent changes at any point, and that's critical to note, that just because you've agreed to something once doesn't mean that you will consistently agree to it. Therefore, if consent is withdrawn for any reason, it's really important that you have the skill set and the ability to re-choreograph any scene that you may need to fit the new consent or boundaries of that scene. And again, that's why you need something very specific skill set to be able to do that.
Especially because time is money and we want to be as efficient as possible on set, because actors also, they're stressed from that scene, no matter if they're having fun. So the quicker that you can problem solve in a physical, technical sense, the faster and more ability actors will have to access and go straight back into the character and back into the scene and what's really important, which is not necessarily the intimate action, it's the storytelling. So the faster we can go in there, change something or adapt something or maneuver something that will help them feel safe, open, supported, and will still work for their character development, the better. And that is a skill set that needs to be taught and practiced.
I don't know if we want to kind of get into this too much now, but if you have questions about rates and standards, we have a more in-depth section on our website if people are interested. So it might be worthwhile actually heading there for a more sort of up-to-date information.
Cool. So a brief history of intimacy professionals. So the first thing to say is that dealing with intimacy on set and different strategies or methodologies is not new. The Me Too movement has not created it. Many, many amazing directors and actors and producers and costume departments have been like amazingly supportive and helpful to actors on set, from suggesting them moves, from attaining their modesty garments, from making sure that they're supported and their nudity waivers are being kept, to negotiating new possibilities the moment consent is withdrawn. A lot of directors have strategies of how to make an environment very comfortable, very open, and very supportive for actors on the day. So by no means are, everything that has been done until now has been bad. I think that's a misconception, and it's partially because journalists just like a juicy story. So the good intimacy stories of directors working with actors, or actors working with each other, or actors working with producers have just not been covered. But when we look at the intimacy that we know nowadays with intimacy coordination, we can trace that back to the amazing Tonisina, which it was an actress and a stage combat teacher and a fight director and a choreographer. And she started exploring intimacy in her own practice, and then decided to write a thesis on it as part of her MFA back in 2004. And the thesis itself, Intimate Encounter, brings up the definitions of intimacy choreographer and intimacy director. Now, beforehand, you could find intimacy coach credits or sexographer credits. There were various credits that underneath those people helped coach a bit surrounding intimacy. That continued onwards, and kind of from 2008, there were more workshops through Tonya and other practitioners that started bringing intimacy more into drama schools, into actors workshops. And slowly in 2017-18, Alicia Rhodes created the role along with HBO. And HBO, as many of you must know, then it came out with a statement that they will always use an intimacy coordinator on set for any scenes that involve nudity or simulated sex. So they were really the first studio to kind of champion the use of this role. In the UK, there were two companies established, Intimacy Directors International UK and Intimacy On Set, which those two companies started to create workshops and certification programs for intimacy coordinators, and to empower actors to not only enjoy their body.
Oh, we may have lost Yarit there. So I'll just step in until she comes back. But yeah, so they were really looking at helping people sort of like enjoy their body and kind of really recognize the aspects of creativity within intimate action. So it wasn't something to be shamed. It wasn't something to be kind of exploited. It was something to be celebrated. And so, and we've worked really hard to do that within our company. And what you're looking at now is sort of like the spread of intimacy coordination throughout the world. We've got, there's organizers and intimacy coordinators in Canada, Australia, UK, and the EU. I know that our company recently went to Bollywood to to be some of the first intimacy coordinators in Bollywood. So it's been really exciting journey. And obviously, like, you see this stuff starting to hit the screens. In 2019, we had Gentleman Jack airing on the BBC with Ito O'Brien. And again, we've had a lot of great inputs throughout the probably like the more organizational structures in the industry. So Directors UK started to create the Directing Nudity and Simulated Sex Guidance, which went out to all the directors in the UK, which was really helpful because it started to sort of clarify like what to look for, how to keep your actors safe in a more specific guideline format. And again, just at the end there, we're really starting to see this spread around the world. You've got SAG-AFTRA creating standard and protocols for intimacy coordinators in the USA, and we've got the AFTRA organization in Toronto. We'll talk a bit about their guidelines later, but it's a fantastic, really extensive set of guidelines surrounding this. And again, now you're starting to see sort of intimacy coordinators working with sort of major networks, working within feature films. So it's a really exciting time to sort of see like a different type of sexuality on screen be celebrated. Cool. So the next slide that we're really going to be looking at is our methodology. And again, it's personal to us at Team IDI UK. Hey, Yarit.
Wi-Fi.
It's okay, got you. I just finished up that last slide. I'm just on this one, if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
No worries. So yeah, we're starting to, obviously, like, this slide is looking at our intimacy coordinator methodology. And again, this is specific to us. This is the methodology that we teach within our training program. And also this is the same methodology that is taught with intimacy directors and coordinators professionals in America, and also Intimacy Coordinators Canada. So we all share a very similar methodology, and the basis of this comes from the Pillars of Intimacy, which was really sort of penned by Tonya Sina, and kind of I think she had really amazing input and collaboration from Siobhan Richardson and also Alicia Rodis. So we're looking really at the 5 pillars, which is context, consent, choreography, communication, and closure. And we've kind of like adapted and grown with this methodology as we've experienced working with intimacy in the UK. So obviously, when we're looking at context, we want to focus on the context of the scene. So what's actually going on? What does the script suggest? What does the script document? You know, or what are the stories of the characters? You know, again, it's looking at, it's telling the story in the context, what's going on around this specific moment of intimacy. And we kind of look at consent, and there's all sorts of different ways and means of working with consent. We often use the Fry's method, which is which originally came from Planned Parenthood in America. And again, there's various, like I said, there's the cup of tea consent video that you can watch here in the UK. There's masses on consent. I think the important thing to note is that when we were working with intimacy practice back in 2016, there really wasn't a huge amount of consent going on, or specific consent kind of methodology going on within like movement practice specific to intimacy. Now, I think it would be wrong to say that like no one has ever worked with consent within movement. That's wrong. That's not the case. But what we have seen in the last 3 years, particularly with the explosion of Me Too, is that it has been far more focused. And it's been a really great generational thing to see when we've gone into drama schools and worked with students that are like a new generation, that they're so on board with it, and you know, it's really wonderful to see. The third, as we said, is intimacy specific choreography. It's nice to have other movement attributes. That's great, and it can feed into like the ideas that come from intimacy choreography. But again, it really has to be intimacy specific. Other movement disciplines won't really have the techniques that intimacy specific choreography will. The fourth one is communication. And again, when you're looking at intimacy coordination and you're looking at communicating even across departments, it's making sure that that communication is open, that it's inviting, that it's helpful, and that it's inclusive. And again, so that's communication across the departments, but there's also communication within the rehearsal room, making sure that people are being clear about what their wants and needs are. And that's being respected. And then we've got the closure and de-rolling section. And again, what we like to think of this one is it's going to we want to prevent the showmance, as it were. We want to make sure that the intimacy that we're experiencing in the rehearsal room stays within the rehearsal room. And even though the emotions may be very real, connected with intimacy, because, when we're replicating this intimacy, sometimes it can be very real. You are really kissing someone else. And so any sort of hormones or endorphins that are going to be associated with that connection, they're going to be very real. However, the situation is fake, and it's important to make that distinction and ensure that people are aware that even though they may be experiencing these very real hormones and emotions and feelings, that the situation is still very fake. You are probably in a fluorescent lit rehearsal room. It's probably quite cold. It's probably like a Monday morning, and just to remember that like it needs to be rooted in the reality of the moment, that the situation is fake. And we want to kind of, like I said before, leave that in the rehearsal room, because we want to have that separation between professional and personal body. Again, just because we are, that actors lend themselves entirely to the role, it doesn't mean that they can't have a personal body that they take home with them and a professional body. And they will have different rules for each. And it's important that we help actors clarify exactly what those rules are. And the last one is to ensure that there are care and support systems in place. We are reeling from a Me Too movement. The world is not the same as it was before Me Too. And with that can be an increased triggering for actors surrounding this work. And so it's vital that productions have care and support systems in place. And again, it's something that we want to ensure as intimacy coordinators, that we clarify and that we demand that actors have access to this. And one of the things that we say when we're working as intimacy coordinators is we really want to model the behavior that we want to see. Again, it's a bit like, if we want people to start talking about communication, if we want people to start talking about consent, if we want people to start talking about context, then we need to do that ourselves. If we're not being open, clear, honest, inclusive with our behavior, how can we expect that of anyone else? So again, we want to start modeling the behavior that we want around us within the rehearsal room and on set. Yarit, did you want to add anything to that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me. Okay, good. One thing I would add is an example of closure or de-rolling, which is a difficult one to facilitate on set sometimes due to, we finish the scene and immediately actors have to go into costume or into makeup, or we're already setting up for the next shot. An example, as I worked with an amazing director, and she created a little ritual, and she explained the ritual beforehand to the actors right before they started blocking the intimate scene with me present. And she kind of brought me in and she said, okay, I want us to do like a little ritual, because I understand from my chats with Yarit that closure and de-rolling is important, and I want to offer some ideas. And she kind of explained it beforehand to the actors, and they were on board. And they also had suggestions of what would work for them. So immediately there was an open communication that this will be done at the end of the rehearsal, of the shoot. And then when we got to the end of the shoot, they did a closing or de-rolling exercise. And it was amazing because they had that moment of pause in a very anxious and efficient environment. They still took those 2 minutes to be led by the director and to just pause there and thank each other and thank the process and thank that moment for connection, and to step outside of that connection and understand, like Lizzie said, that it's not real, but the emotions are real. And it just continued the rest of the day with this enormous sense of connectivity between the two actors in their other scenes. So I think the closure and de-rolling exercises, if you are a director, I would highly kind of consider, how can we close that particular intimate shoot so we can step out of it, and it doesn't take method actors out of their process. If anything, that gives them a minute closure to then focus on the rest of their character's journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Hang on, sorry. There you go. Cool. So one of the things that we would really like to start seeing it in a more sort of like official context is something that helps the intimacy coordinator operate and do their job. One of these things is really, we've obviously explained like what the intimacy coordinator's role is. It's very difficult for the intimacy coordinator to do that role without these production requirements. And we've got the first one here is pre-production meetings. We want to make sure that we are very aware of what's going on before we get to the shoot day. Because again, we don't want to work with surprises. We want to eliminate any something that is maybe potentially like deconstructive happening on the day. So with that, it becomes planning. And so it's vital that an intimacy coordinator is involved during those pre-production meetings so that we have that the bird's eye overall view of the intimacy for the entire production, so that we have an idea of what's the context for the scene, what are you looking for, what's the creative vision, and to have all of that information beforehand. Like, for example, you know, like what modesty garments may they choose to wear? Is there anything that we need to know regarding consent and boundaries? It's all that information that we need very early on, before we get to the shoot day, before we get to the rehearsals, so that we can start planning to be the most effective that we can be and the safest that we can be.
Yeah, I would add that the pre-production meetings allow the liaison between us and the other departments. So like Lizzie said about transference of information, the minute that information is said or spoken, or we know what the vision of the director is for that particular moment, we can start having those chats with the actors. We can have chats with the costume department or the set department or the prop department. I remember an experience that we had. We needed fake semen, but we needed a consistency that would allow us a certain action, let's say this way. So then there was a discussion with the prop department and myself and the ADs, and also with the actors, about what would the actors like, what would they need, and therefore what is the consistency of that particular fake fluid that we need. So all of those considerations were done in the pre-production stage. So then when we get into the set, we can just go. So taking that further, when we come to the pre-shoot day rehearsals, when possible, those rehearsals really need the director there. They need the actors that are going to be acting those parts. Some productions, if they do have access to pretend set or sample set, like I know some intimacy coordinators might have had like a bed in the rehearsal room, or pillows, or a duvet that is similar to the bedding that they will have. It just helps the process, because if suddenly you have something completely different on the day, the choreography will then need to be different. And if we're considering how do we lower the amount of anxiety or worry from all the other departments and the actors, having something that is completely not suitable will basically make us start from the beginning when we get to the blocking rehearsals. However, let's be honest, not every time can you have the time or the actors or the availability with the director to do pre-shoot day rehearsals or the finances. So it's considering what is possible. Is it a quick chat in the rehearsal on the night of before, or when the actors just get off the set of one of the days? You know, what are the possibilities? And also, what are the specific requests from the actors? Because if they do want a rehearsal, how do we make that happen?
Yeah. And that sort of feeds into the access to essential departments. When we're considering all of these things, like if we need set, well, then we'll need to talk to someone about that to ensure that we have either got like rehearsal set that we can use for that day. We'll need to talk to costume about any modesty garments that they're wearing. We'll need to talk to hair and makeup. An actor might have tattoos that need to be covered in an intimate place. Or, you know, if you've ever worked with a merkin, you'll know that we definitely need to talk to hair and makeup. So a merkin is a pubic wig. And again, that's something that needs to be considered if we are going in for a scene of nudity. And again, these are all vital things for us to be able to do our job. If we don't talk to the departments, then we can't really coordinate to the best of our abilities. And the most crucial aspect of that is really the actors. If we cannot talk to the actors, everyone's, no one can really create safely at that point. We want to be consensual when we create choreography, and we need to know from the actors what their needs and wants are. You know, is there something that they are concerned about? Perhaps they might be on that period, their period that day, and there's white sheets, and they have a concern about being nude and on their period and on white sheets. It might be all sorts of things. And so without access to these essential departments and actors, our job becomes impossible. So to make it safe, to ensure that we are really doing the best that we can do for the actors, and to ensure that it's a collaborative process, it certainly requires access and communication.
And that leads into respect and safety considerations, from what Lizzie already mentioned to anything regarding the minute we do have the access to the set department. If the new idea is that the simulated sex goes onto a table, that table needs to be reinforced. So all of those communications can help us create safety. If both actors need to be shoved into a wall and that's where they're having the moment of groping, then is there a back pad? Do we need a stunt coordinator suddenly to facilitate the push into the wall? All of those kind of health and all of those communication moments actually allow us to achieve better safety for the actor. But safety and request goes a tiny bit beyond that. And for example, the level of language that is used on the set. Mm-hmm. You know, moving into the 21st century, we don't want to call scenes a rape scene anymore. or even a sex scene on the call sheet. How can we describe those scenes so no one seeing the call sheet is offended or triggered, and there is a sense of respect that it's a work environment and not something that may cause someone a discomfort? And not only when we just have children on set, but how can we change our language to be a more kind of positive, open, and inviting language? It goes the same to the notion of respecting someone's needs and that is, you're able to do that when you stop making assumptions. So making an assumption that a female intimacy coordinator should be brought in for a female actress is incorrect. And the same, it will go the other way around. It's about person-to-person connection. It's not about gender. And the same when making an assumption that, oh, we should bring a female or a male boom operator because of their gender. No, let's ask the actors, let's ask the crew, which from that team and that department is comfortable to be, in a 2-meter distance from a performer that might be doing a scene that could have sexual violence or anything that might trigger anyone. So showing that openness, that respect at an early stage can actually help crew be more mindful and speak up. You know what, I'm not comfortable with that one. I'm more than happy to give this to my colleague over here because they're less, they are happy to do that particular moment. Also giving considerations of safety that actors might need a break, or they might need a timeout during those kind of scenes. Also, crew might need a timeout, whether it is, for example, the sound department from having to hear certain sounds for X amount of hours. Again, we need to consider that those things, although it's simulated or not real, those are still sounds that might impact the nervous system. And that really falls within the kind of duty of care chain that Lizzie mentioned in the slide earlier. How can we put those things in place within our the procedures of the duty of care that we're looking into from a very early stage?
Yeah. Cool deal. Yarit, do you want to chat about closed set and blocking rehearsals? I realize we're a little bit out of sync. Sorry, I lost you earlier. It's okay.
No. That's fine. A closed set is not new. And there are various types of closed sets, especially depending also on which production company and how they want to run their closed set, how the first AD would like to run their closed set, and what procedures come higher up from a studio, for example. They might have a policy around that closed set already. Closed set discussions need to start in the pre-production stage. So your intimacy coordinator also knows what kind of closed set will you have, and therefore those things are communicated to the actors. Because funnily enough, some actors that might have specific requests around their hair or their wig or their makeup might want more people in the closed set, like their hair and makeup standby, or they might want their PA there. So it is a matter of making sure that that is fully open and communicated early on, to an extent that there's a list. So we are aware of who in the team from each department will be in the closed set, and that could be then monitored. So there's no sudden surprises of either more or less people. Or, for example, I was in a production that the focus puller, there was an issue with the camera equipment, and he needed to be in the room. He could just not do his work unless he's in there. So, it's creating an environment that crew feels comfortable to say, you know what, I can't do my job, rather than them having to wait until they're fully frustrated that whatever's coming up on the monitor is not looking good. And because of that, they're saying something. sorry, it's close set. And what else, Lizzie? Because my
blocking
thing is
rehearsals.
Similarly with blocking rehearsals, keeping that open communication with actors, so the actors are aware who are they going to see in their blocking rehearsals. Is the first AD in there or not in there? Some first ADs don't want to be fully in there. They want the ability to come in and out, and that's okay. Is the DOP or the DP present? Do they need someone from their camera team to come in at some point to look at something specific? How are we running the blocking rehearsals so the director and actors and the intimacy coordinator have a sufficient time, not too much time, because obviously things need to move on? Is the costume standby needed for the blocking rehearsal? And the same with the makeup. And when we're then doing a crew show, how far and what are the actors comfortable showing in the crew show? What is essential to see for the camera department or for any other department? What is the consent and boundaries of the performers? Is just walking very structurally through it, even without contact, enough? Or do the other departments actually need to see a tiny bit more? And if they do, how is that communicated back and forth to the director or the actors or the first AD? So we maintain a very clear, efficient, and sufficient communication. So every department feels like, okay, I'm ready to now get ready for set up and do this shot.
Cool. Thanks, Yarit. Okay, so talking about when do you need an intimacy coordinator? Because obviously, like, we've given lots of examples of who we are, where it comes from, and what we do. But I think that a lot of productions have questions surrounding, you know, when should I bring one in? You know, like, I only have actors holding hands. Do I need an intimacy coordinator for that? And I think that we've tried to sort of clarify this with this slide. And again, we really want you to think about the context of the scene. Like, what is the scene about? What's the story? And again, if it requires any type of nudity or simulated sex, then do consider bringing in a professional. The same way that if you had a scene which included violence, the likelihood of being or attempting that without a professional isn't really recommended. It's the same really with intimacy. And again, I think we have this preconceived notion that just because we might experience intimacy in our everyday lives, that we have the ability to facilitate or create it or simulate it for a production. And it's not necessarily true. Simulating intimacy and creating intimacy between the professional and personal body are very different. And there needs to be considerations for that. So we've kind of split it up into three here. The first thing is if it's requested by a performer. And again, what you're seeing now is with nudity riders and waivers, that actors are very mindful now that they may be asked to do intimate scenes, and that they would like to work with a professional who does this all day, every day. So, and not only for, you know, a safety consideration, but also to really create the best possible scene for them to work within, you know, to make sure that there is, you know, collaboration between the departments, and to ensure that there is someone who has like the creative and techniques to make it look as authentic as possible. So we are seeing more requests by performers to have an intimacy coordinator. The second is if you're really sort of seeing a simulation of non-consensual intimacy, such as sexual violence or manipulation. And again, like, this might not be covered solely by a stunt coordinator. They might not have the skills, the means, or the techniques to be able to facilitate intimacy. And again, like, intimacy coordinators have very specific training surrounding intimacy. Now, However, intimacy coordinators are not stunt coordinators, and it's very important that we get some clarification between those roles. So if you do have a scene that contains sexual violence, it's really important to consider both, again, because they're going to be insured for different things at that point. And trying to do a catch-all becomes very problematic, especially when you're looking at the power dynamics between your stunt coordinator and the power dynamics between your intimacy coordinator. And again, the higher fire power ability is different, as is extensively the training is very different. So it's very important to separate both of those roles. And the last thing, if you're wondering about, well, what considerations you might need for intimate scenes, and it could be anything that, again, primarily it's anything that impacts a nudity or simulated sex clause or waiver. So if an actor is saying, if a scene demands that an actor be nude from the waist up, that's something that you will need to consider an intimacy coordinator for, because there will be legal ramifications if that's not adhered to properly. So it might be things like intense kissing, simulated kiss, groping, simulated sex, suggestive sexual contact, nudity or semi-nudity, portrayal of contact with chest or genitals, use of prosthetic genitalia or breasts, and presence of minors or underage cast. And again, we are facilitators. We work within other departments to ensure maximum safety. And again, if you can kind of consider that this is sort of a catch-all for intimacy, and not all intimacy has physical contact either. I've just seen a question about implied or insinuated sexual content. And again, two actors may have got off a plane. They may have only been introduced to each other that morning, and yet have to portray a scene where they've been married for 20 years and they might not know each other at all. So again, we can do work within them to help them connect, to create instant chemistry between actors. That is a skill set that we possess. So it's important to consider that not all intimacy involves contact, as we said right at the beginning. Yarit, do you want to add anything?
No, that's great.
Cool. All right. And then, oh, last one. Here we go.
Okay, so I'm aware that we will be stopping for Q&A in a split second. So I'll try and bash through this. There are some questions I've noticed already in kind of the chat or the Q&A about the training or the level of skill set that you as an employer or you as someone that wants to kind of go into this line of work are interested in knowing. So one, if you're an employer looking through their CV really to look at professional experience, they need to have had access to work with performers and directors on set. So it's not only on-set experience, it depends what kind of on-set experience, because again, you do need to have some sort of understanding of how an actor works, how a director works, and how do they collaborate together, because you will be coming in and out of that relationship to collaborate in a system. The CV should have intimacy coordinator credits already, and there are enough people that have had already the opportunities to do that job. It is a job of the head of department. It's a small department of one, but it is still a head of department, and therefore it's important that whoever you choose has had an opportunity to investigate that role fully, because it is time, money, and efficiency that they will have to work underneath. Specialized intimacy coordinator training. There are certification trainings now in the UK, And those certification trainings are will have certain minimum amount of hours. They will include practical classes, a contact-based time, so with a teacher and an instructor, and then which is from an intimacy coordination background, to take you through situations on set, role playing, to take you through different type of simulated sex techniques, what the kit is, and everything that is fundamental information like good communication, consent, dealing with resistance, and so on and so forth. There are examinations and assessments throughout the training process. And after that kind of main body of training, individuals start to go into assisting and being a trainee on set, and then slowly getting mentored fully into practicing as a kind of lead intimacy coordinator. There are additional trainings that one must have, and a lot of intimacy coordination certification trainings ask for those way before they even start the intimacy coordination training, and that is health and safety training. So it's external courses that look at mental health, first aid, sexual harassment, bystander intervention, conflict resolution, and equality and LGBTQ awareness, and so on and so forth. There's a creative industry passport, and of course, if you're an engager, you must be able to check whether they have some sort of DBS criminal record check that doesn't show any sex or violence or safeguarding previous experiences. Because again, it is a health and safety role that does have choreographic aspects into it. So we kind of need to tick all of those boxes before you go in. And Lizzie, how about we put the last slide up and we'll start taking Q&A.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes. The last slide is up.
Nia, would you like to take us through the Q&A?
Yeah.
And Reek, if you can come
Unmute.
on as well.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, both. That's really just so interesting and such a kind of fantastic and clear presentation. So thank you very much. If everyone wants to just take a screen grab of this final slide, we'll leave it up for a couple of seconds. And then Lizzie, if you can stop sharing so then that we can have the three of you on the screen, that would be great.
Okay. I'll just, all right, good deal.
Yeah. Thank you. Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have until about 4 o'clock. But if we obviously get it done before then people are kind of welcome to stick around, or our speakers are welcome to go. I'm sure, you know, I feel so kind of thankful for having you anyway. So yeah, let's crack on with these. I'm gonna leave the first one until the last. Someone has asked, will the slides be available afterwards? How do you usually deal with that? Do you share them or do you prefer not to?
I think if people have questions, they can feel free to email us if they're not answered here or if they'd like further information.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to put the email addresses for everyone in the chat function at the end. So should we leave it there and then people can get in touch individually?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, Jay Jones is asking, could an intimacy coordinator also serve as a movement director on a set if they both have specific skill set, or is it important that these two roles remain separate?
Hello, Jay. I think I know Jay Jones. I would say there is when we're considering power dynamic, there is issues surrounding taking more than one role on set. And that is something that needs to be considered. My first reaction would be why? Whether it's a budget consideration, or is it an availability consideration, or is it a COVID-19 consideration? But yeah, my biggest concern would be the good thing on set is that because the environment is so stressful and anxious, it will you really need to be kind of focusing on your one expert power skill set. And if you have to do two things at the same time, it's a bit difficult, and it might affect your ability to oversee consent on set. Lizzie, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it becomes complicated when the lines are blurred between roles, because then are you asking them as your intimacy coordinator or as your movement coordinator? And so it can get a little messy. I think we also want to be careful about I understand that movement might be a little bit different, but just again, making sure that there are no crossovers between, you don't want an intimacy coordinator and a director being the same person, because again, you've got a mixture of hire and fire power ability and third party, and now the third party isn't a third party anymore. And so maintaining that, I think, is really important. Yeah, I think Yarit probably answered that really well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Are there any workshops created for Spanish-speaking professionals?
Aha.
Enrique.
Here's one we brought earlier.
So, Enrique, would you say something a bit about yourself before?
Yeah, I guess I can. Hi all, sorry. My name is Enrique. As you can see, I'm originally from Spain, but I've been living in London, in the UK for a while now. I work as I started working as an actor, but then I moved into movement, and I have an MA in movement direction, and then it transitioned over the last 3-4 years into intimacy coordinating. I became an intimacy coordinator with IDEA UK, another organization in the US, and I've been working as an intimacy coordinator for the last 1.5 to 2 years. I work for Netflix, BBC, Sky TV, I should be working right now for Amazon in Italy, but of course, COVID-19. No. And I'm Spanish, so let me answer the question. Are there any Spanish-speaking workshops? Not right now, I'm not gonna lie to you. I've contacted some Spanish production companies. I feel like in Spain, the movement of intimacy coordinating is still a very, very, very developing movement. Hasn't reached yet any sphere that has any power to change anything. So right now there's no workshops. That being said, whoever said that question, please feel free to send me an email, because I am gathering Spanish speaking people that are interested in intimacy coordinating and to try and create a group or a momentum forward in Spain. So please, whoever you are, drop me an email. If you just Google my name and intimacy coordination, you should be able to find my website, or ask Nia. And please send me an email and we can be in contact, be in touch, bring this into the Spanish-speaking world. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so this is a question from Nana. Due to the impact of COVID-19 on social distancing, how will this impact on love scenes? But I mean, I'd say all scenes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to take that as a broader question, then that would be great.
Yeah, I think it's quite difficult to say, because everything is evolving and changing very quickly. We've got stages that are being sort of that might be lifted up or down at any moment. So it can be very complicated. And obviously one of the things that we do is very high risk. It's one of the most high risk things that you can do with COVID. So we have to be very aware of that. I'm hesitant in saying anything too definite, because obviously the situation changes so rapidly. But I will say that intimacy coordinators have to have actor safety at the heart, and if they don't, it makes our role like not void essentially at that point.
Yeah.
We have to consider actor safety at all times, and if that impacts the work or the amount of work or the time span in which we do that work, well, then we have to accept that, because there is nothing more important than actor safety to us.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Maria is asking, how do you get a job as an intimacy coordinator? And says that they have a background in first aid, mental health, diversity, inclusion, directing, communication movement, inclusive professionalism, as they're already an actress and a producer, filmmaker. Yeah. So how does one become an intimacy coordinator?
I think we probably all feed into this question. So basically, I would say training. Training is the way forward. Find a training program that you feel has full disclosure about what their training is, about what you hope to get out of it by the end. If there's a clear timeline in which you can do so. Talk to people, find out from like the people on the course already, what's it like? Are they enjoying it? Are they finding that it is fulfilling? And also just consider that it would be essentially training for another career. And if you were going into, if I woke up tomorrow and decided that I wanted to be a lighting designer, well, there's like steps and processes that I would have to do in order to get there. And so do consider it as it is a career change and an investment, as opposed to something like you kind of dabble in or additional skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also put all of the training courses up on this last slide, didn't you? So if people do want to do a bit more reading, then you can just all the training is available on your website, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
if you want to feed into that at all, sorry, Nia.
Yeah. I was actually just going to say, if you could just quickly tell everyone how you both got into it, but like maximum 2.5 minutes each. Okay.
Okay. We'll have to. Do we get ejected? Is there a buzzer?
Yeah, exactly. It's room 101. Okay. Enrique, you go first, and then Yarit, you can have time to think about it.
Well, as I said, I trained originally as an actor, as a musical theater actor, then physical theater. So I was always a person that was very interested in how bodies move in space. So then after training as an actor, then I trained as a fight teacher. So I was trained how to recreate violent actions that kept the actor safe. So I trained as a fight instructor, as a stage combat instructor, basically. Then I went and did an MA in movement studies to start working as a movement and choreographer. So yeah, everything kind of seemed to be leading me towards, I was developing a language how to talk about very high stakes scenes with actors and working with bodies. And then 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I started discovering the world of intimacy coordinating. I knew Lizzie and Yarit from a long time ago, and I knew Lizzie, she was starting already working in intimacy coordination. I went to the States and I trained, because at the time there was no training in the UK. So I went to the States and I trained there with Intimacy Directors International, with under Alicia Rodis, Tonya Sina, Claire Warden, and then I went to Toronto as well to do that training there. And then I became certified, and then I joined IDEA UK and I became certified with them. So that's
right.
2.5
minutes. 2.5 minutes. Woohoo! Okay, Yarit, go ahead.
He's Spanish. He speaks fast.
He speaks really quickly.
It's kind of a similar journey. So a long time in theater. I work in theater still, predominantly as a movement director and a fight director. And I came, and weirdly enough, my MA was in directing, but I kind of heard about the intimacy practice that was starting to happen in the States from Lizzie. And Lizzie created back then it was the same company but under a different name, And then I wanted a bit more, so I went up with Enrique. We went to Toronto, and we trained with Rachel Fletcher, Alicia Rodis, and Claire Warden, and later on Alicia Rodis made more kind of a broad intimacy coordinators training for some people. So that's kind of how I started, and then I got certified through the American company. So I would say, you know, in connection to Maria's question before, it doesn't matter what your background and how much stuff you've done before, because I've been there. I've worked as a movement director and a fight director. You always have to retrain, because it's putting your head in a different mindset, and you learn loads of new things. And you suddenly reflect back at how you used to do stuff and go like, huh. How do I do this now in the 21st century with new experience and new understanding about the human psyche, the mind, and how we're developing as artists nowadays?
Brilliant. Okay, Lizzie, you got 2.5 minutes. Go.
Oh, stressful. This is so stressful. Henri, quick, speak for me. So I had a poor experience personally of intimacy when I was 18, and it kind of left me. I'm sorry, and to add to that, that was in a theatrical sense, and so that left me really considering for quite a few years afterwards, like, why was that acceptable? Why was that allowed? How on earth could that have been considered okay, especially like in an educational environment? And so I kind of pondered about it for a couple of years, and then I read an article, and it kind of brought it back to the forefront again. So I started really like looking into it and saying, is there something that, because I also trained as a stage combat teacher. I've done a lot of movement directing as well. I have an MA in directing. And so I was really trying to consider, you know, like we have all these safeties and protocols for fights, but we have absolutely nothing for intimacy. And occasionally they are linked. And yet we're putting in all these physical safety protocols, and yet there's no emotional or safety protocols for intimacy. So I then, by just pure luck, I met Tanya Sina at a workshop in America, and we started chatting, and we compared methodologies. We had a lot of the same notes. Her methodology was far more advanced than mine. And we decided that we would have more effect if we combined forces and tried to change the world together rather than in competition. And sort of it evolved from then.
Brilliant. I think that's so, thank you very much. You've all done very well. Thanks. I think that's really important for people to know, though, isn't it? Because we spoke earlier about how, you know, it's kind of, hip is the wrong word, but certainly relevant role. And I think it's only going to become more relevant. And so I think it's important for people to understand that it is a genuine career that has to have a lot of kind of training and inputs put into it, and that you can't just simply walk into it, you know? So good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we are going to move on to Sophie Taylor's question, which is, what techniques do you have for helping actors with their anxiety leading up to a scene?
I think planning comes into that a huge amount. Like the more you plan for something, you can kind of lower anxiety, because you are taking out and removing some of the triggers and awkwardness that might surround it. So if there is something concerning them, you can find out beforehand what that is, rather than finding it out on the day. Does that make sense? Yeah, Henri, please add to it.
No, sorry, I apologize. No, I was going to say that generally, at least on my experience, the anxiety comes from the unknown, because the intimacy scenes are not talked about, are not discussed about openly. They're always a shush secret. They're always like, oh, we're going to have the sex scene now, okay? And it's like, well, what I'm going to do? And generally, the fact that we are there to have an open, clear, honest communication with the director, the OP, first AD, actors, discussing with them what are they comfortable to show on scene or not. We'll go scene by scene, we'll go moment by moment, we'll discuss where they're comfortable to in terms of nudity, in terms of which physical actions. So that verbalizing of all the moments in my opinion, or in my experience so far, generally lowers the level of anxiety of performers completely. Because it becomes not just something that we have to do, which is becomes part of just your normal profession, just part of your normal day-to-day work. So that's how I did it. And then of course in the rehearsals, in the rehearsals with the actors, again having a very clear structured rehearsal of what we're going to do, making sure that both the actors know what the boundaries and consent levels are from the other person and not. So we create a constant communication loop between all the parties involved, so there's no miscommunication, no misconceptions, and everyone's at the same page and we know where we're going. That's how I deal with it, and generally it works for me.
Yeah, I'd like to just like quickly add to that, is that when we're talking about anxiety, there are two kind of aspects that we should take into consider. How can we lower the anxiety that is added due to the results or due to the factors of the day itself and the process, versus the anxiety that a person might have for various personal reasons. And those two will always kind of do the tango slightly together. And when we look at, practices like CBT or different kind of psychological practice or surrounding trauma and how that comes and kind of shows itself in the body, or stops the ability to create or be grounded or feel the sensations of your actions. We need to, again, look at those two layers. Because one, we are professionals, we're mental health first aiders, but we're not therapists on the day. I remember once I got a terrible request from a producer, can you go in there and fix the actor? And my response was, I can chat with them about the vision and how they are comfortable within it, but there is nothing to fix. And that is very important, because fixing the actor is talking about their personal anxieties versus what is the environment and how are we doing our process to lower the environmental anxiety that might affect their personal anxiety. So with those power dynamics, how can we consider to change the situation? If we're changing the situation, we can help change the thoughts of the actor about themselves or about other people. We can't completely eliminate how a person will think about themselves or the situation, but we can at least give them an open communication and a platform to feel comfortable to express any feelings, any needs, or any requests that they might have. And if we're giving them that support cushion, their behaviors that comes from those thoughts will change, and therefore the situation of how the whole day folds will change. And that's us helping their anxiety levels with what we can on the day. If it's something that goes beyond that and there are personal anxieties that start to kick in, then that goes again back into the duty of care chain to reconsider. And for us as a mental health first aider, we will help them get support elsewhere, because we cannot use the onset environment to as a therapeutic environment. If there is something seriously triggering or traumatic, that individual needs to be taken out of the traumatic environment into a safe space to talk with an objective professional in their and that is not anyone that is on set.
Thank you, Yarit. That's such a kind of wonderful in-depth answer to that. Thank you all. Okay, so Nana's asking, this is about whether if actors don't particularly like each other but are cast in roles as where intimacy occurs, what would the intimacy facilitator do to ensure the actors don't display their animosity during the filming or a particular scene?
Yeah, I've had some experience of this.
What? Really?
Can you imagine? And I mean, one of the ways is to really work within their characters. And that's the important thing, because again, once you get into like, this is actor A and actor B having sex, so that's not the case. That's not the case at all. It is actor A and actor B simulating sex in a very fake environment. And so once you kind of like distinguish the line between the actor and the character, this becomes far easier to deal with. And so, you know, you can really talk about what the character's motivations are, what the character is doing. And again, it's something that the director will also be, will probably also be aware of and want to help problem solve in that environment. Again, it's a collaborative process. And I think,
yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I would say also that, you know, is us, a part of our role, as we spoke before, is advocate. And because we have that kind of advocate relationship with the actor, we might be privy to certain aspects that are bothering them. And one thing to really consider is that when there's a particular behavior on set, the behavior is not originating because the person is a bad person, or necessarily that they might not like another person. The reasons for that behavior might be really not connected to the other person at all. So as an advocate, if the director is happy for us to have those conversations with the actors, and if the actors are happy to have those conversations with us, we can open a line of communication as part of like a conflict resolution third party to chat about what is it that is actually frustrating the performer. Is it the other performer, or is it something else that we can that they feel is bothering them, that we can help meet their needs and find requests that are tangible in that environment, and help mitigate that problem. Because again, it might not be me not liking the other person. It might be something that's really non-connected to that is affecting how I'm behaving on set in that particular moment.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Thank you, Yarit. Okay, are prosthetic genitals always used, or do some actors consent to using or showing their own genitalia? Is actually, yeah, I mean, also, yeah. hold on a second, sorry, I've just rethought that question. You're also probably under privacy clauses, so let's move on from that.
No, I mean,
not necessarily privacy clauses, but it also, it's down to actors' personal, yeah, I guess it's down to the actor at that point, whether they use a body double or whether they don't, or whether they use prosthetics or whether they don't. There's obviously constraints around that, like budgetary constraints or other things, but yeah, it's
okay,
preference.
Great, that's fine. So a mix, you would say?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say it really depends on which type of production are we talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Great, thank you. So these two next questions are actually quite similar. They're about how do you get into intimacy coordinating. So someone says that they have a training in stunt coordination. Can that be one way to get into the role? And the other is, can an AD or anyone else become an intimacy coordinator too?
I mean, I think anyone, you know, if they want to become an intimacy coordinator, like there's avenues and ways to do that. Like we say, you don't have to come from a particular background, as long as you're willing to do the work to meet the requirements to get into start training. I guess like if you were going to do a postgrad in something, or
I mean, I know people that come from stands, people come from AD, people come from costume departments, people that come from a completely different background, from casting departments even. These casting directors that move into intimacy coordination, directors that move into intimacy coordination. Yeah, I think it's more I don't know, depending on your skills as a person and then your training as an intimacy coordinator. You know, we all have baggage and bring pre-training with us to our new jobs. But
yeah, I think it goes back to the question we had earlier. No matter what training you've had on set or not on set, there are certain skill sets that you will need in order to even start the intimacy coordination training. Just like if I would want to go and do the stunt training, I would need to get X amount of skills underneath my belt. Obviously our training is not that intense and it is attainable, but yeah, it's just thinking of it as a pathway. How do I now enter the pathway to do this?
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Eliane Strong asks, how do you deal with the director that you feel is not taking the concerns of the actors on board? Where do you take that further if you have not already had enough assistance from, say, the executive producer?
Good question, very good question. At the end of the day, as a third party, and as a person that has an expertise, we can only advise regarding our expertise. We do not have the power to force that on a production. We can consult them, we can raise issues through that duty of care chain, and make sure that the director and the producers are aware of the consequences that something might have on someone or on the process. And this happened to me, a question similar to this, you know, what do you do? Do you step away from the job? And I think in the one of the Bectu sessions on the Wednesday workshop, someone else, you know, on a different topic was talking about, when do I know whether to walk away from a job or not? And that is the minute that it's unsafe. And unfortunately, if we have a job that we feel like that the advice that we are giving as experts of that particular skill is not being taken on board, then we cannot do our job properly and we cannot make sure that the actors are safe.
Yeah, it's always tricky. I mean, in my experience, again, it's just taking it as high up the chain as you can. Unfortunately, I mean, execs tend to be great allies, or in my experience that they've been good allies in place, because they are the ones that have ultimately hired you. So generally going up the chain, and if the director doesn't listen to you, then you go one step ahead, one step above, and then one step above, and then one step above. But there's never an answer. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's always a challenging situation.
You employ your conflict resolution pretty quick. and again, like looking for some, I think also community support is really helpful. I know it's something that we may not have mentioned as much, but when you're an intimacy coordinator, you are taking on a lot, and you might be the recipient of a lot of traumatic information or personal information, and so it's important that you have a place to process that which is not on set. Because again, like that, there are confidentiality issues surrounding that. We want to make sure that we are that true third party. So it's very important that you have a support network outside of that production to be able to process things, and to often also bounce ideas, and to hear a viewpoint that isn't your own. To say, you know, hey, I experienced this on set today with you know, a director. You know, what might you do about it, or what are some options that you think that yeah, do you know what I mean? Like making sure that you've got something that isn't just sort of your view, and that you can have other ideas, but you also want that from people who are experiencing the same job that you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Helpful. Yeah, I mean, I think from our experience anyway, like that would apply to most grades, you know, because you work in such kind of insular technical roles across the industry. So I'd say that's pretty broad. Okay, following on from that question about actors, there's a lot of questions about actors and how to deal with actors, and you know how to so this is do you find actors respond well to your input as an intimacy coordinator, or can they be resistant?
Who's first?
You go first.
No. I was opening.
Too late. You volunteered yourself.
No. I was opening the floor.
Consent. No consent.
Go for it. No, go for it.
I would say We are there to work with actors. We are not there to teach actors how to act. And that is really important, that we give the actors the space to bring their toolkit into the process. So we actually are, in our process, we're flexible around what they need and how would they also like to work, as long as we can retain the health and safety and consent within the work. So, and do jump in here, Enrique and Lizzie, but I would say in my opinion, an actor is never difficult. They have a way of working. So it's about us understanding what is their preferred method of working, and then finding a way for both parties, us and them, to find our way of working. So going back to the power with rather than power over. We don't want to put power over the actor and say, oh, now intimacy scenes have to be done this way. No. Like, the actors have been acting for a long time. Okay, let's give them a tiny bit of respect for their process, because they know their character much better than we do.
It's about, sorry, Erin, go ahead.
Yeah, keep going.
No, I was just saying it's making sure that it's not about you and coming in, as like, I'm the intimacy coordinator, this is how I work, and I'm going to impose my practices upon you. And again, because if we, again, like as Yarit said earlier, if we hold too tightly to any choreography, it could be out the window anyway if there's a consent and boundary issue. So we have to be malleable, we have to be adaptive. And again, it's about that collaborator. It's about being sort of, kind of being able to juggle all sorts of things, because you're going to have actors too. And again, this is often about multiple actors as opposed to just working with one actor. So you have to be adaptive to be able to work with two types of process at that point, because one actor might have, an enormous process and one might have neither. You also might be working with a seasoned professional actor and a background artist who may not have as extensive training. And then you've got to be able to manage that without saying, this is my method, you are both going to do this, because they're going to have huge gaps in maybe experience or knowledge or anything. So just making sure that it's, when you're working, it's not about you, and it's about a safe process.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, ignoring for the moment the current employment statuses for all freelancers and the industry as a whole, do you find there is enough of a demand for intimacy coordinators to keep you financially secure? So I suppose this is quite an interesting, so we've spoken about how it's a career and how it's becoming a lot more vital, it's a growing role, but actually, what is the reality of being an intimacy coordinator?
Well, often, I mean, and Enrique, yeah, please speak to this as well. There is only so much of you to go around, and when you take on multiple jobs, you need to be very aware that they've hired you, and so you need to have that availability to them, because often what they don't appreciate is hiring you and having someone else for 90% of the project. And so being very aware that there are some limitations around just how many projects you can take on at one time and do them well and consistently, I think is something to have in your mind as well, because you might take 8 jobs, but if you can only do 2 of them, then what's the point? Especially to do them well and effectively, which is our role. So I think it's a little bit of a tricky question, because again, financially secure, that's kind of different. That means different things for everyone. So yeah, I think ensuring that you can do a job well is probably what this comes down to. Because again, if you're letting people down, or if you're consistently not there, then you're not it's hard to say that you know you're working on that job, if that makes sense. Yarit,
Yeah.
Enrique, what do you think?
I completely agree with you, but I think that comes because the nature of the intimacy coordination in a TV series, we may only be needed for one scene in block one, and that requires, you know, a day of rehearsals, the day of shooting, and some pre-production. But that's, you know, that's 2.5 days, 3 days out of a block of, you know, 6 to 8 weeks. So we are always juggling different projects at the same time, and so then I think it's so yeah, it comes and goes. You know, there are I am definitely not rich. No, I don't know about you. You know, I am definitely not rich. I am not swimming in projects. I would always want to have more projects, but it's true that sometimes, you know, as luck has it, you get like 2 months that you get like 6 projects. I can only do 2 of them. And then you go for a period of, you know, 3-4 months with less projects, and then it picks up again. So I think that's the life of the industry. Just because we are new doesn't mean that we're in demand, but we are. It's not like we have our agendas full to 100% every single day of the. At least not in my case. I don't know, maybe you are, but not in my case. So it is financially stable. You know, I would say that over the last, I don't know, 1.5 to 2 years, that was when the thing was starting to pick up. I was able roughly to get my bins from Intimacy Coordinating, but again, months, really great months, not so good months, up and down as usual.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to delve a little bit kind of back into the role again, if that's okay. We also have about 10 minutes left, so these are going to be the last couple of questions. Is there a situation in which multiple intimacy coordinators would be required, and how would they collaborate?
Yeah, I think so. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in. I mean, I think generally if the scene requires multiple new people or multiple performers having simulated sex, let's speak of like an orgy, or I mean, we've all done scenes where there's like a you know, there's an orgy and you have multiple background artists. Of course, we're talking about actors, background artists, they deserve the same level of respect and consent as any other performer. So when you're thinking about consent and nudity waivers and communication, please also include the rest of your background artists. So yeah, if there's like 20, 30 people having simulated sex all over a room with people going through, you may need more than one intimacy coordinator, because there's a lot of people for you to be able to choreograph in a timely manner, to gauge the level of consent and keep everything working on. So yeah, so you may divide and conquer. Some of you may take half of the room with the one half of the room. Some, maybe one of you works with the principals and one of you works with the background artist. Each one is different. I mean, again, each project is different, but there's no different than, you know, than any other job. You need more people, you talk to each other, you collaborate, you're in pre-production meetings, you talk to each other, you're in constant communication, not leaving anyone in the blank, and then just go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then another question about power dynamics and remaining a third party as an intimacy coordinator. Okay, so when you're hired by a production company or director multiple times, would that, yeah, I'm going to change this slightly. So would that influence whether you can advocate for the actor's impartiality?
There's a difference between work and personal life. And I think the fact that you've worked a couple of times with the same director doesn't make you mates. And I think at the end of the day, it's knowing what your job is and what your responsibility is. And for us, our responsibility lies with the actors and the background artists, as Enrique said. You know, as every artist, you kind of want to come back and work with the same people, especially if you've enjoyed the process. But to do the job, you must do it well, and being that advocate and saying no to creatives that you've worked with before is part of your job.
Yeah. Lizzie, do you want to do you have any experience of that, or?
I mean, I think it comes down to, like, you know, quite honestly, who you are as a person. If you can be influenced by a director who's trying to coerce you by power of friendship, then you probably shouldn't be doing the role. So, like, if it might just come down to something as simple as that. Because again, like, we have to be that independent third party at all points, and if we can allow something like that to happen, again, it questions the ability of how to do the role. And it is something that we train for, not specifically that, but just being able to be aware of, you know, what power dynamics are at play when someone's using something like, you know, a coercion of friendship to try and get what they want. Because that's essentially, you know, if it boils down to it, that's essentially what it might come to, is the director is trying to get what they want, regardless of the feelings or consent of the actors. So being able to spot it is something that you need to be able to do, because it might be so subtle. It might be, you know, again, it could all be in wording, it could all be in tone of voice. A lot of the time it's suggested. So just being able to track that. And again, if you are friends with the director, you can have a conversation with them, you know, outside of the room, being like, hey, you know, just, you know, because we are friends, I just thought, you know, it's something that I picked up on in there, and you might just want to watch that type of behavior, because it could have some implications that, you know, you might not intend. And again, you can have a conversation to them about intent versus impact. Your intent is to have the best scene possible. However, your impact at the moment is that actors are having a negative experience. And so, yeah, being able to have those conversations are really important.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'm just conscious that a couple of people have asked about access into the industry, and also whether there's a BAME specific intimacy coordinating course out there. Could I please ask you to accept emails separately from people, so because I think that's a broader kind of discussion that obviously needs links sent and so forth. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
I mean,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we are lacking BAME people at all levels in the industry, and also in intimacy coordinating. So please, if you're from the BAME community, come and talk to us, because we want you. I promise you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so Nana, that is specifically for you. So I will check those off as having been answered. Okay, let's finish with this one. Pauline Stone asks, de-rolling is a new term to me. Can you briefly explain how to help an actor to de-roll?
De-rolling is a term taken from drama therapy, in which an actor, in a sense, steps out of the role. So they're de-rolling. In drama therapy, there are various exercises relating to accessibility of how to do that, because obviously one thing will not work for everybody. Now I'll be honest with you, some actors have found their own strategies to do it. Some actors that are recently coming out of drama schools will have more understanding about de-rolling and how to take care of their mental health, because a lot of drama schools have started to kind of infiltrate mental health awareness into the trainings of actors nowadays. So it's one, understanding who has pre-existing knowledge of that versus who doesn't, who has made their own strategies of how to cope with something, and what are the methodologies that the actors would prefer to use. Because some actors might want to stay in character for the whole shoot. They might have a specific way of working, and we don't necessarily want to temper with that way of working, as long as there's safety all around. I would say that de-rolling is a much broader kind of exploration, and I'd highly recommend having a look online and in some books about facilitation of de-rolling. None of us is a drama therapist, so that is slightly tricky, but also I would say those subjects are covered in intimacy coordination trainings. They are covered in a way that a mental health first aider, specifically for theater professionals or acting professionals, can help those actors. But again, the minute it starts to go into something that might be too traumatic and triggering, that's where a mental health professional has to come in. And within this kind of environment, how are we facilitating a moment in which de-rolling or closure can be done? And that is a bigger conversation to also include the director in it. So they are aware of giving that space or giving that time, or just plainly communicating with the actors as what their preference around that is.
Okay. Perfect. Enrique or Lizzie, do you want to add anything into that?
Not for me.
Only that, you know, as you have said, everyone's going to have their own ways and means of doing it. An interesting read is an article by the Chicago Reader about Profiles Theatre Company. And one of it's quite an extensive article. It was very well researched. And it includes an example of someone who could really have benefited from doing some de-rolling, and the impact that's that's staying in their role caused. And so I think that it's a really harrowing case for the inclusion of de-rolling within like acting.
Yarit, we also, that I really remember clearly you telling me as well, like that the film industry as a whole really needs to start understanding that people are doing characters. You know, people are characters, like they're not. So to kind of amend the language as well, like, you know, oh, the actor is doing this, and you were like, no, the actor is not doing that. The character is doing that, and that really stuck with me, because we do, as kind of these you know, sponges of culture and these different dynamics and relationships, we really sometimes do genuinely think that those people are madly in love with each other, you know, through telly and film and theatre. And it's yeah, I think that kind of amendment in language must be so important, especially for actors.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can't remember the name of the documentary with Jim Carrey about his Andy Kaufman role, which was an amazing role, well done for him. But his process was very, very difficult for him mentally and emotionally, and it was extremely difficult for the crew. So, you know, how if this comes into intimate scenes, how do we help? How can we support? At the end of the day, we can't force anyone to do de-rolling or closure, but we can at least offer and give them the space to do it.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, one last final thing. What is any kind of wisdom that you would give to anyone either in the role or who wants to enter into intimacy coordinating?
Be a sponge. I would say be a sponge, because you've never stopped learning. Like, we certainly don't know it all. And I think that that's a very important thing to really hit home for everyone. Just because we have these roles doesn't mean that we know everything. We have expertise in this area, but we're all still learning. The world's evolving, the world's changing. We aren't where we were 3 years ago. We aren't where we were 2 years ago. So just keep being a sponge for information.
Amazing. Thanks. Enrique?
No, I don't know. Keep striving wherever you are, in whatever position you are, to have a safe space, a safe space of work. In what you can make a difference in any position that you are in the industry. We are there as another piece in the machine to keep making this work safe for everyone, cast, crew, everyone. So we are there to create and to tell stories. That's what we are there for, to do. To tell stories and to make it safe. So we're joining you.
Perfect. And Yarit, to close the session.
I would say validate and appreciate everyone. And that goes into appreciating all skill sets that are on set, even to the extent that you can truly actively listen to them and take on board some of their language. So if you can speak, with the director's language to the actors, you're empowering and enforcing the director's language into the process, rather than as an intimacy coordinator coming in and just speaking your language that might not be part of their process. And understanding the language of the costume department and the hair department, as an SFX department if they're involved in the scene, and just bringing and validating everyone's information.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for the work that you do. I think that it's so vital, and I'm sure that on a daily basis you are making people feel safer in this industry, and well done you. Okay, so people have asked for emails, so we will put that in the chat function. So if everyone could just do that, if you feel comfortable with it, that would be really great. If you want to share whether you've enjoyed this or have taken anything from it, or find it valuable, please use hashtag Wednesday Workshops and hashtag Bectu on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And what should people use for your organizations, guys?
I've just put my email on there, and again, myself and Yarit work with team idi-uk.org. I will say that's changing very soon. We are having a little bit of an exciting rebrand going on to reflect the fact that we work with intimacy and coordinators and directors, which is for film and theatre. So there is a website.
Okay.
If you follow the company online, you'll be able to see the hashtags. And I think hashtag Team Idea UK and hashtag consensual creativity as well. So yeah, hashtag intimacy coordination, and follow us. Well, follow the company.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And then if you have anything to ask me, this is my email coming in on the chat now, which you're welcome to keep a hold of. And yeah, if you have feedback on anything else you'd like to see Bectu putting on, please let me know. I would really appreciate any kind of feedback on what you feel you need during these really uncertain times. So again, thank you very much, Yarit Dor, Lizzie Talbot, and Enrique Ortuno. Is that correct? Oh God, I can't do the Spanish pronunciation. I'm so sorry. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Squirrel.